Chuck Olenek. I'm a reenactor, and also, now that I am a retired history teacher, I get to be a full-time history geek. So what I've been doing since I left the classroom is I've been running up and down the state of California and doing videos about the California missions and the Assistences and the Presidios and Russian California. And I have a series called Chasing Banditos, where I'm following the careers of California banditos. And there's another series that I call California's Living History. Well, then I realized I have to start a new category because of some stuff that I want to film. I have been passing ghost towns going back and forth, and I've always wanted to stop and document the history of these places. And so I'm starting a new series, California's Ghost Towns. So this should be the first installment. And where I'm going, I'm actually passing near several places that have been called ghost towns, but they still have people living there. I have been passing for years when I go up the California 395, where I'm going right now, to an event for the Society for Creative Anachronism over in Ridgecrest. I would pass this sign for, it was like a California landmark sign for the Town of Garlock. And, okay, always meant to turn there and just take a look. And then I was finishing up a video, doing some research on the Butte mine or tunnel, which is near Randsburg. And I noticed a reference, then there was a quote that said it opens up the south adit or portal, opens up and you can see the Fremont Valley, and you could see Garlock, or the ghost towns of Garlock and Saltdale. Saltdale's about 6¼ miles away from Garlock. So I've decided I'm gonna make that turn on the 395 and go along that road and see what there is to see and tell the tales of those two places. I hope you stick with me as I start this new adventure. Okay, so mentioned there's several towns you need to remember, and Red Mountain, which we've just entered, this is going to be in basically, it's at the border of San Bernardino County. The reason we need to remember this town is because this is the nearest, or this was the nearest hospital while Garlock and Saltdale were still functioning communities. Okay, and the next couple of towns come, as I said, we've just crossed over into Kern County, and this is Johannesburg, and it and the neighboring town of Randsburg are kind of important. Okay, you'll notice like the South African names, they were kind of naming the towns for the, in reference to the mining that was going on in South Africa. The reason we need to remember Randsburg, and I believe it's about 16 miles away from the ghost towns we're going to be looking for. So this is what served for law in this area during the gold rush, was you had to go to Randsburg. And then, so that's going to be kind of an issue. Garlock town site. No idea. there's my first sign of Garlock. Well, judging by the really unfriendly dog, I guess there still are a few folks living around Garlock. I'm going to go a bit further to figure out exactly where Garlock was so I can tell its story. So, behind me is a building from the 1890s. And this is where at least part of Garlock was. Garlock, a ghost town in Kern County. It was originally called Cowtown. It was also called El Paso City, I guess because those are the El Paso Mountains over there, and there was a gold strike that ended up taking place in like the 1890s. But we have two other names, Garlock, and this place was also called Eugeneville. Okay, why those names? Because a guy named Eugene Garlock showed up after the gold strike happened, and he ended up building a stamp mill to crush the gold ore. All right, and I guess the name Garlock tended to stick better than Eugeneville. So somewhere up there is the south entrance or adit or south portal to Bodo Schmidt's tunnel. The reason Bodo Schmidt dug that tunnel is he wanted basically a shortcut or a more reliable road to be able to bring any gold ore down to Garlock. Garlock had a post office, sometimes, from 1896 until 1904, and then from 1923 to 1926. The last resident moved out in the 1960s. She had run a curio shop. 3 miles to the southwest was the site of Old Garlock. The site is now registered as California Historical Landmark number 671, designated on December 1st, 1958. All right, let's go on to Saltdale. That looks an awful lot like where Saltdale ought to have been. So behind me, and it's kind of hard to see, is the reason why Saltville was founded in 1914. That's Cone Dry Lake, and it's a moist playa. And what basically ends up happening is when groundwater kind of bubbles up, salt gets deposited. And this is going to be the reason that this town existed. The lake is approximately 5 miles long and 3 miles at its widest point. There were disputes over who had the rights to the salt claims. Thomas Thorkildsen and Thomas Rosenberger had some 60 claims they were leasing, which were challenged by Charles Cohen, founding father of the settlement of Cane or Cone Springs. Cohen had previously located claims on the lake bed and challenged the claim jumpers in January 1912 in what's described as a lively gun battle on the dry lake. I want you to think about this. There were people in 1912 shooting at each other on that dry lake over the salt, or actually over the claims to the salt. After the shootout at the lake, what ended up happening is all the guilty parties were brought in and Cohen was not charged, whereas the other guys were charged with criminal trespass and they were fined $50. The Consolidated Salt Company constructed a crushing and screening plant and laid a baby gauge railroad track along the playa from where a gasoline-powered locomotive hauled the salt to the crusher. Consolidated began shipping in 1914, 240 tons or more a week by October. The output that year totaled 20,000 tons. In January of 1915, the company was shipping about 12 cars of salt weekly. Business boomed. Employing 30 men, Consolidated was turning out about 720 tons a week by June of 1915. The crew was soon increased to 65 about a year later, while a 4-story mill was under construction. Except during rainy winters, the company pumped well water onto the lake floor. The brine thus produced was then pumped through a mile-long ditch into several pond-like vats, the largest covering 43 acres, where the brine was allowed to evaporate. After 2 or 3 months, a 6-inch layer of very pure salt would form. At harvest time, a circular saw mounted on a portable platform cut the layer into cakes. The cakes were then cleaned by hand, loaded into small cars, running on a temporary track, and hauled by a gasoline-fueled locomotive to the mill. There the cakes were ground, sized in screens, and sacked, and shipped to Los Angeles. By 1916, there was a competitor, Fremont Salt Company, and they built a plant on the east side of the playa in 1917. In 1919, when the Southern Sierras Power Company brought in electricity, the companies together produced about 17,000 tons. Okay, now you've got 2 different companies at opposite ends of the lake, and they've set up their factories, and what's happening now is because of the employees that are working for those 2 companies are, living here, a school district had to get set up. And that lasted about a year for the Saltdale School District, because it eventually got rolled into the school district with Garlock. And then eventually they tried again, and again that failed. Well, several years of drought took its toll on Saltdale and on the industry in general. Because of the drought, the salt isn't being brought to the surface, and more employees are starting to move away. Also, and there's an idea of, hey, maybe we'll bring salt up from San Diego and have the mill process it here. And that turned out to be totally unfeasible. So eventually people are just gonna drift away. In 1975, the salt factory finally closed for good, and Saltdale became another forgotten ghost town of the American West. Not much remains of the abandoned salt town, thanks in part to the salt deteriorating the deserted structures. Most have completely collapsed, and only the rusting foundations of unidentifiable buildings are left, along with a small stretch of railroad track disintegrating into the salty earth. Okay, that tells the story of these 2 ghost towns, Garlock and Saltdale in Kern County. I hope you stick with me as I continue looking for places like this. And I hope you subscribe to the channel, because that'd be really cool. Bye.